You don't need to know everything about IT to start a career in this field. If you have ever wondered what the actual IT fundamentals are that you need to know to be effective on day number 1 in your IT career, then you've come to the right place. Today we're covering hardware fundamentals from a real world perspective. What this means is you don't actually need to know the finer details of computer hardware, like RAM speeds or power supply capacities and CPU speeds, to be effective in an IT role. Instead, we're going to focus on some of the most important hardware components that you should just have a general understanding exist, and where you can find more information about them to be effective in your role. Something important to keep in mind is that different organizations and businesses often outsource computer hardware issues, whether that is support from the computer manufacturer themselves, like HP, Dell, Lenovo, or they hire third-party support. There are many reasons for this, and those will be covered in future videos on policies and procedures, but we don't need to really get into the finer details of those in this video from a practical hardware perspective. So what this actually means, though, is that oftentimes you don't really have to worry about getting your hands dirty taking apart different desktops or laptops to replace components. But what you might need to know is how to determine there is a hardware issue in the first place to get the support that is needed. Additionally, if you're not seeking an entry-level IT role like in help desk or IT support, and you're looking to work more in networking or cloud cybersecurity, the finer details of the hardware won't be as important to you, and you will see this is just going to be the case as you progress in your IT career. Some of this information just becomes, well, irrelevant in some ways, but ultimately the fundamentals of all of this information that you're going to learn today is what you'll remember and keep with you forever. So let's dive in. I'm going to show you an example using this old computer here, but it's important to remember that there are many different types of computers out there. They come in all different colors, shapes, sizes, etc., but they all contain some of the very same core components. However, starting off with the motherboard here, this is a piece of hardware that helps all of the other components that are connected work properly together. So many of the components that we're going to talk about within this video connect to the motherboard here. From a troubleshooting perspective, however, you'll most often see damage from like blown capacitors. These are these little things here and all around the computer. If you have a blown capacitor, this will look bulged out and look like it's going to explode. Next up is the power supply. These come in different shapes, sizes, and even different levels of power, like the wattage there, right? The size of your power supply is most often determined by the amount and different types of components you have in your computer. Some components require more power, so you might have to get a beefier, bigger power supply. And you don't necessarily need to know that right away, but you just basically have to have this understanding of, hey, if there's a lot of components in here, or powerful components like video cards and things, might need a more powerful power supply. But really, unless you're building a custom computer, this won't matter much to you. However, if you're just troubleshooting a computer that won't turn on, a quick way that you can determine if a power supply is bad is doing the sniff test. Yep, you just put your nose right up next to it, and if it smells like burning metal and just kind of weird, your power supply is probably bad. And all the information that you need to know about that power supply is right there on the power supply. Tells you the manufacturer, how many watts it is. And that information is going to be very helpful, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Next up after that is the hard drive. And hard drives are connected to both the motherboard and the power supply. And they also come in different shapes and sizes and capacities. And they are also known to go bad as well. And if you have a regular hard drive in your computer, like these big ones here that we're showing you, these have spinning components in them, meaning there are parts in there that actually move. So oftentimes you can tell if a hard drive, a regular hard drive is bad, is if you hear them spinning really loud or even grinding. And if you're very careful, you can actually put your hand inside of the computer while the computer is running and make sure you're grounded and all that fun stuff, because, you know, don't want you to get hurt or, you know, the computer to get hurt either. But you can put your finger on that hard drive to see if that it is spinning or not. Like you'll actually feel the spinning discs inside of there. And if you don't feel anything, probably not working. Could be a good indication that you need to get a different hard drive. Another addition that I want to add to hard drives here, because they are becoming more and more frequent in the different builds. And I can't show you from our specific build with this hardware that we have, because on our motherboard, we don't have a slot for NVMe M.2 drives. So as you can see here, we have our regular hard drives, which have the spinning platters in them. we have our solid state drives, which don't have any moving parts in them. And now we have these NVMe or M.2 drives. These actually plug right into the motherboard and they act just like solid state drives. Overall, knowing that there's hard drives and solid state drives out there, where you can find them, and they exist in the computer and they plug into these different things, that is going to be very helpful for you. And if you need to replace one of those, everything that you need to know about that hard drive, well, that's actually on the hard drive itself. You can find all that information right there from the manufacturer to the capacity. After the hard drive comes the RAM, the random access memory. Sometimes these RAM sticks can go bad. And a great way to troubleshoot RAM is by removing RAM sticks one by one. If you have multiple RAM sticks in there, obviously, you can remove them one by one, reboot the computer a couple different times, and see if you still have some of those issues that could be related to your troubleshooting process here. But you can also just do a complete replace of that RAM to see if it might fix some of those issues in your troubleshooting process as well. But again, everything that you need to know to replace the RAM is located on the RAM sticks, as you can see. After that comes the CPU, or the processor. All processors have some type of fan or cooling system attached to them. And most often you're gonna find that those cooling units will go bad and you'll need to replace them. Right underneath these cooling units is the processor itself. And I'll tell you, just be careful not to touch the top of these with any screwdrivers or anything like that, because they are very sensitive. But you can replace processors as well if you've come to the determination that that's what's causing issues. And again, everything you need to know is located right there on the processor itself. The next on the list here, what we can show you is this video card. And this is kind of an additional component added to this computer. Most desktop computers have onboard video, and that onboard video is attached right to the motherboard itself, but we don't need to go too much into detail there. We're talking about this component specifically, this additional component, which is the video card. There could be other components attached to your motherboard, because your motherboard has these things called PCI slots, and things like video cards and other accessories will plug into these PCI slots. So all the video is run through this video card here. And if you find that maybe one day you turn on your computer and you don't have any video at all, you can remove that video card and then plug in your maybe HDMI cable or VGA cable, if you still have one of those, into the back of your motherboard on the computer there to see if that maybe fixes your issues with video. That's just one example. When troubleshooting other issues, there just might be cases where it's one of these additional components and you'll need to replace those to continue during your troubleshooting process. The last thing that I want to highlight here is the Ethernet port. If a computer is experiencing any types of internet issues and everything else is working fine, or other computers on the network are working fine, take a look at this Ethernet port. When you have a cable plugged in and it's blinking, that's often a great sign. If you have a cable plugged in and you don't see any lights, that could be a sign of it being bad. This Ethernet port is attached to the motherboard. So if that Ethernet port is bad, you would need to replace the entire motherboard to fix that issue, or know how to solder in a new one. But that gets super complicated and you don't really need to know how to do that. I promise you. You don't, because you could just buy an Ethernet card that plugs directly into one of these PCI slots like your video card did. So there's that option as well. Now, I know that I pretty much glossed over a lot of information compared to maybe some things that you've heard before. Or if you've never heard any of this information before, that's great. This is really all that it takes from a practical perspective to get started working within the IT field. Just from a core computer component hardware standpoint, like, you don't need to know much more than this. And the reason for that is because in your day-to-day job, in the real world, working in IT, every single IT professional is going to utilize this same thing, right? So whether, the issues are related to computer hardware or replacing computer hardware and any other thing related to IT, including cybersecurity, including networking, programming, AI, all of that fun stuff, every single IT professional is using Google to help them along the way. And that's something that you will utilize very heavily just starting off within your entry-level IT role. As an IT professional, you are going to utilize Google to search for the specific issues or components as they relate to these different or specific computer builds. Whether that's like a custom computer build and you're researching the specific RAM, power supplies, motherboards that are in that build, or you buy something from HP, Dell, Lenovo, etc., right? They are all going to have these core components that we talked about. Those are often the most replaced components and troubleshooting issues that you would find from a hardware perspective. Now, there are going to be more issues, right? And maybe even more common issues that you could come across. But this is all information that you'll learn over time. And this is all information that you'll learn specifically from Google. And again, over time. But just getting started out, knowing where these components exist, just knowing in general that they exist and kind of what they look like, just visualizing them in a desktop computer, visualizing them in a laptop, knowing that these components are there and that they can be replaced, and often they are part of troubleshooting processes, is all you need to know. Because honestly, Google and going through these steps over years, getting experience, that's what's going to put all of these different pieces together. You don't need to know the different RAM speeds or hard drive speeds and memorize them all. It's not required. It's something you'll learn over time potentially, but oftentimes you're going to find that as you're accelerating through your career, you don't really need to know any of that. For instance, you don't need to know what specific hard drives are in Cisco switches if you want to be a network administrator, because spoiler alert, there are no hard drives in Cisco switches. Just configuring ports all day and doing network things, you don't need to know some of this other stuff. But over time, that's stuff that you'll pick up on and learn about if you have an interest in that. And I'm by no means trying to discourage you from learning any of these things further. But from a practical, real-world standpoint, it's not anything that you actually need to know right now to get started and to be effective in day one. Other things that you can do outside of Google to be effective in day one from a practical standpoint: ask your peers questions. Take really good notes. Ask your peers questions and take really good notes. I promise you, that is going to help you be very effective outside of what we've covered today. There are endless YouTube videos, blogs, and even manuals for everything that you need to know to take your troubleshooting to the next level. So like we said, every IT pro is going to pull up their best friend Google if they need to replace components or to make sure that they are purchasing the right components, or a quick video or walkthrough on how to actually replace or troubleshoot those as well. Because sometimes in entry-level roles, you might have to replace a screen on a laptop or a keyboard on a laptop. And I can assure you that not every laptop is built exactly the same. And sometimes you have to go through many different hoops just to replace those components. But there are YouTube videos and manuals out there that exist. And all you have to do is do a quick Google search to find them, and it'll walk you through that. And that's okay, because you're learning while going through that. You aren't expected to know how to do all of these things right away, or expected to know some of the finer details on some of these components, but you are expected to know how to find that information. And Google, YouTube, ChatGPT, these are all going to be your best friend when you're getting started. But now you know where these components exist in a computer, and you know how to gather the information you need to be effective in your role. I could tell you from personal experience and doing this YouTube thing for like 10 years now and hearing from people all over the world, what we covered in this video will prepare you for the real world more than all of the other filler and junk you try to learn about from those entry-level certifications out there. I'm not trying to discourage you to learn them more in depth by any means. All information is extremely valuable and it's great. But if you want to learn more about those different topics and components that we talked about in this video, go for it. That's fine. But I'm simply encouraging you to get started in this field with practical information that will help you be effective on day one in a position. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but depending on your IT career trajectory, much of the finer details and information like the hard drive speeds, the CPU speeds, the power supply capacities, that's all learned over time. And sometimes that means many years. And that's okay. Sometimes you just really don't need to go that granular at the end of the day. And so I made this video because I don't want people to think that they need to know or even remember those finer details to be an IT professional, because you don't. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. If you're interested in more videos like this, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. This is something that I've been putting together for quite some time. It's part of this little worksheet that I'll kind of show you, be cryptic like and stuff, because I don't want to show you all of it yet, because it's really something that it means a lot to me. And I've been working on it again for a long time. So anyway, as always, take it easy.